So to make a good croissant, you need a sheeter, a proofer, a beautiful oven, years of experience, good flour, etc, etc, etc. Well, you may not need to. Today, I'm gonna teach you how to make a croissant fully by hand. All you need is a rolling pin. I think we can do that. I'm excited to do it because croissant is kind of a thing I'm known for. So enough talking, let's get baking.
Well, let's start with the beginning. We're gonna bring some milk and put it into a pot to warm just to the touch. We'll add into a bowl the warm milk with some of the sugar and the yeast. We're gonna whisk that up with a tiny whisk and let it rest for about 10 minutes. It's gonna start foaming. In the meantime, I'm gonna grab a beautiful flour from Bagatelle, French flour, but you could use some regular pastry flour from Canada. We're gonna sift it, add the remaining of the sugar and the salt, and mix all of that together. Once we've mixed everything, we're gonna create a well, which will then add our egg yolk and our yeast mixture with the milk. I'll then start to incorporate the flour into the mixture. Of course, you could do that in a mixer with the dough hook, but the idea is to use no machine. Then we're gonna start forming some sort of a dough, just enough so it kind of like comes together and no liquid remains. This is the point where I'm gonna add some butter. You can use a high quality butter, but in this case, you don't really have to. I prefer that you save the money for the European butter for the beurrage that we'll do later. And we're gonna start working on kneading the dough. It might look really dry and clumpy, but trust me, after working it for a while, it's gonna start to come together. Remember that you do want to work the gluten similar to pasta because we want some strength in the dough because it's going to have to support all the butter when we start doing the feuilletage, the lamination. Once the dough is coming together and we worked it, it's going to probably take 5 to 6 minutes. We'll put it in the fridge to rest for about 10 minutes. After 10 minutes, we're going to uncover it and we want to flip the dough from underneath all the way to the top. It's going to start working the gluten and we're going to roll it around so we bring back the shape and we're going to put it back in the fridge for about 20 minutes. We'll repeat the same action. We're going to fold the dough inside out. Then we'll put it back on the bench and we're going to give it its natural, round, beautiful form. We'll then place it back into the bowl. We're going to cover it and we're going to let it rest for now an hour. After an hour, I'm going to place it on my bench and I'm going to dip it up into two. Quite honestly, this is a 900 grams pâton. It's a little much to work by hand. It could be very hard and will take a lot of space, so I suggest you cut into half. And I will also use one of them for a pain au chocolat recipe that I'll post later. I'm gonna now start shaping it. The idea is to get some sort of a rectangle, but don't worry too much because I created a little piece of parchment paper that is the dimension that I want of 7 by 7. We're gonna fold it up and now we have the square that we want to try to achieve. So we are going to flip it back and using a rolling pin, we're gonna actually try to roll it so we can have the dough coming to every edges while remaining to the same thickness all the way through. Now I'm gonna wrap it into some parchment paper and we're about ready for the next step.
So this is the end of day one. The détrempe is ready. It's gonna go in the fridge and rest for 8 to 12 hours. We'll then start the lamination process tomorrow on day 2. See you tomorrow. Right, this is now day 2. Our détrempe has been rested all night. We're gonna start working on the beurrage, which means we have to make those beautiful plaque of butter using some Bridget's. We're gonna put it together, cool that down, and we'll insert it inside of the détrempe to encase it, and we can start laminating after that.
If you're lucky enough and a baker, you'll obviously have some sheets of butter that's perfect for lamination, but as a home baker, this is very difficult. So we're gonna cut our butter and put it into a piece of parchment paper similar to what we did with the détrempe, but this time we're gonna do 5 by 5. We're gonna start knocking it down so it's starting to get into shape and we're gonna roll it. The idea is that it becomes one piece of batter of an even size, just like so.
There's definitely a lot of methods out there. People are gonna tell you to do 2 single fold, a double and a single, 3 single. I mean, honestly, it's really up to you whether you want a really dense, millions of pockets or very light, large pockets. As for myself, I'm going to do a double and a single fold, right? So that's what we're going to do next.
Now it's time to get the elbow grease out. We're gonna get our détrempe and we're gonna start rolling it down using a rolling pin. You obviously want to make sure you have a little bit of flour so it doesn't stick to the rolling pin and to your bench. The idea is to make the dough slightly larger, like a nice square / rectangle, so we can actually start the beurrage and incorporate our delicious butter like so. Obviously we're gonna turn it around so we have almost like a diamond shape, so it's easier to bring back the ears of the dough over the butter, almost to create like a book. Make sure you also remove as much of the flour as possible. We do not need extra gluten. We want to seal those little pockets so no butter will be extracted. Then we're gonna start rolling it. You can even push it down slightly, but be careful not to crush the butter so it doesn't fuse with the dough. We are now going to roll it. The idea is to get a shape of about 18 inches, which I don't know what is in centimeters right now, but we also make sure that we brush all that extra flour that you see. When you roll it, take your time, do not push too much, and if the dough resists and seems to be stretching back, feel free to put it back into the fridge to give it some rest. And don't forget to release the dough from time to time, just like I'm doing, so it doesn't get too stuck to the bench. Then we're gonna start our double fold. We're gonna take the top of the dough after brushing the extra flour, and we're gonna flip it about 1/6 of the length of the dough. Then we're gonna take the other side and bring it over. Then we're gonna flip it again over its side and flip it. We're gonna then put it into some plastic wrap to rest for about an hour. This is very necessary. Then we're gonna have the second fold after an hour. Our dough is nice and cold. You want it to be about like 8 to 12 degrees Celsius. And we're gonna start rolling it for our single turn, all right? Which means that we're gonna flip it almost like a book fold, 1/3, 1/3, making sure that it's always the same size, making sure we just keep it nicely when we're rolling it. We're looking for another 18 inches. We're gonna make sure that it's nice and straight as much as possible. Using a sharp blade, I'm also going to cut the end, which will result in a nicer uniform dough and it will have better layers. Now it's ready to be flipped and then wrapped in plastic for another rest.
So this was our second fold, which was a simple turn. We're gonna leave that in the fridge to rest for about an hour, and then we'll start rolling the croissant.
Ideally, I would even tell you to leave it for an extra night in the fridge for the gluten to really rest, and it will be easy to roll and the dough won't stretch. But remember, if the dough does stretch and resist, just leave it longer in the fridge. The idea is to get a nice rectangle of about 25 centimeters by 30. This will give us 5 to 6 croissants. I will then cut the end. You don't have to do it, but of course it's going to give you a much nicer product. So we're gonna trim the edges. Then we're gonna start measuring our croissant. I'm gonna do 8 centimeters intervals and then 4 and then 8. And then very simple, we're gonna cut a triangle using a ruler and a very sharp blade so we don't crush those beautiful layers. At this point, you know what's going to be next, and it's the rolling. When you start rolling your croissant, you want to make sure first of all that you let the dough in the fridge for about 30 minutes to an hour, so make sure the butter is nice and cold. And you want to stretch them, not too hard obviously because it will rip. And once they're stretched, you're gonna start rolling them, trying to apply the least amount of pressure, so once again you don't crush those beautiful layers, because we worked on them for a very long time. And lamination is fun, but it does take a lot of time, especially by hand. We repeat the process of elongating a croissant and rolling it, being very careful. You also want to make sure that the tip is below the croissant. You can see I'm locking it under, so that way it stays nice and round, so when they start proofing, they don't overlap and flip and becomes very ugly. So you can even like push them down, like I see, you're gonna see when I roll it at the end, I'm gonna give it like a slight little push when I push them down. That way it's going to help kind of keeping them in shape. One more time, you're gonna roll it, and of course you're gonna have the end croissant. Those what I call are the mini croissant or the staff croissant. They're not gonna be as pretty, but it will definitely be just as tasty. Once we're done with the rolling, we're gonna place them on the pastry tray with parchment paper, or if you have an exopad or seal pad, look at those layers. And we're gonna just cover them with a loose plastic wrap so we don't crush any of those layers. I know I said that a lot.
We're going to now proof the croissant for about 2 hours until it double in size in a high humidity and about 23 to 24 degrees Celsius. I'm going to do it in my oven with the light on and the door slightly ajar. Our croissants are now nicely risen. They double in size. We can see the beautiful layers. We're gonna add the egg wash and we'll bake them.
We'll then gently remove the plastic wrap and give them the jiggle test. If they jiggle like this, they are ready. Now be careful when you do the egg wash. I'm doing egg yolks and a little bit of water, and you want to apply it carefully, making sure you only apply it on top of it, but you don't want to do it on the layers, or else it'll get kind of glued and it's not going to puff to its maximal potential. And one thing we do want is maximum potential. We're gonna bake them at 350 for about 18 to 20 minutes, and once they are cooked and golden brown, we're gonna let them rest on the rack. You do want to make sure that you let them rest until fully cool down before you eat them. Then I'm gonna crowd them, give it a beautiful slice so you can see the honeycomb structure. I will say it's pretty good. I've done better, but I'm still pretty happy with those.
Here it is, we've made it. A homemade pure butter croissant fully by hand. I'm pretty proud of what we achieved today. I cannot wait to see yours. Feel free to tag me. If you enjoyed this video, please like, comment, and subscribe. And I will see you, of course, on another video. As per always, recipe will be in the captions. And let me know what would you like me to cook with you next. On that note, I'm going to enjoy this croissant. Bon appétit.